The sky tore open above Lagos, before I even had time to blink, and the sound that followed was not thunder. It was deeper, wetter, like the air itself was being pulled apart at the seams. I stood frozen under a torn awning with a bag of plantain chips in one hand and a cheap black umbrella in the other, watching something the size of a stadium slide out of the broken clouds and hang there, humming a note so low, I felt it in my chest before I heard it in my ears. Rain kept falling. People kept screaming. Around me, the market square that had been full of noise and bargaining and laughter only a minute earlier was now empty, except for abandoned baskets, a phone still charging on a counter, and me. I do not know why I did not run. My name is Daniel, and I have never once in my life been the brave one. My sister Grace always says I would trip over my own shadow if it moved too fast, but my legs simply refused to carry me away, and before I understood what was happening, I heard crying. It came from the gutter beside the electronics stall, small and sharp and full of fear. I crouched down, rain sliding off my umbrella and down my collar, and found her curled into a ball no bigger than a folded blanket. She was not human. Her skin had a gray-blue shine to it, like wet stone under moonlight, and her arms bent in places human arms do not bend. A thin membrane covered her scalp, doing almost nothing to keep the rain away. Her eyes were huge, dark and wet with tears that looked painfully familiar. She flinched the moment she saw me, pressing herself further into the gutter, as if she could disappear into the concrete. I understood the fear. I was a stranger twice her size, and her entire world had just fallen out of the sky. I did not know her language. She did not know mine. So I did the only thing that made sense to me in that moment. I tilted the umbrella away from myself and held it over her instead. She stopped crying almost instantly. She stared up at the black fabric above her head, as if it were the ceiling of a temple, then looked at me with an expression that needed no translation. It said, quite clearly, "You did not have to do that." I stayed there, soaked to the bone, holding that umbrella over a child who had no business being in a Lagos gutter during what the news would later call the first contact incident. My chips were ruined. My shoes were ruined. I did not care. 3 shapes came sprinting low across the street a few minutes later, armored, fast, moving with the kind of precision that told me instantly they were not human either. My whole body locked in place. I raised my free hand slowly, keeping the umbrella exactly where it was, praying that whatever weapons they carried would stay lowered. They did not fire. The tallest one reached the child first, scooping her up with a desperation that needed no translation either. That was a mother. I recognized the motion because I had seen it before. The day my niece slipped near the stairs and Grace grabbed her half a second before disaster. The little one pointed at me, at the umbrella, at me again, chattering something in a language that sounded like wind moving through glass chimes. The mother studied me for a long, silent moment, rain streaming down her armor, her daughter now safe against her shoulder. I held the umbrella out toward her, awkward and dripping, unsure what else a person offers a stranger from another world. She did not take it. She simply looked at it, then at me, then spoke something quiet into a device on her wrist. A heartbeat later, all 3 of them folded into the rain and vanished, as if the street had simply swallowed them whole. I walked home in silence. My sister asked why I came back without the umbrella, and I told her I lost it in the chaos. She scolded me for losing a perfectly good umbrella during an alien invasion, which even in that moment struck me as a very human thing to worry about. For 3 days after that, the entire planet argued. News channels replayed the moment the sky opened over and over. Analysts shouted over each other about invasion versus contact, and governments across the world scrambled to decide whether to fight or negotiate with something none of us understood. I stayed quiet about what had happened in that gutter. It did not feel like a story that belonged to me alone, and some part of me was terrified that saying it out loud might undo it somehow. On the 4th day, the sky split open again, and this time, it did not stop at one ship. I stood on my sister's rooftop with half the neighborhood, counting vessels until I lost track somewhere past 40. They arranged themselves above the city in a pattern too deliberate to be anything but a message. Silent, motionless, waiting. My hands were shaking, and Grace gripped my arm so tightly it left marks. Then one smaller ship broke away from the formation, and descended straight into the market square, right onto the spot where the electronics stall used to stand. Every phone in the crowd rose at once, recording. Soldiers moved into position along the rooftops. I felt Grace pull me backward, but my feet, once again, refused to obey her. A ramp lowered from the ship, with a hiss that cut through the tense silence. The mother stepped out first, no longer in armor, dressed instead in something formal and layered that shimmered faintly under the gray sky. Beside her, holding her hand, walked the little one, dry now, healthy, wrapped in a small cloak the exact color of the umbrella I had lost. I did not move from where I stood. I could not have moved if the building beneath me had caught fire. The mother crossed the square alone, leaving her daughter a few careful steps behind, guarded by two figures who watched the crowd, but never once raised a weapon. She stopped directly in front of me, and behind her, 40 ships hung in the sky, like the entire fleet was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do next. She spoke first in her own language, low and musical, and then a device on her wrist translated the words into halting but clear English. You gave shelter to a child who was not yours, on a world you did not understand, expecting nothing in return. Among my people, that single act is the highest law we carry. We do not forget kindness, offered without condition. I opened my mouth, closed it, then finally managed the only honest thing I had. She was scared, I said. I had an umbrella. It felt like the smallest thing in the world. Something shifted in the mother's expression, something I chose to read as warmth, though I could not be certain alien faces carried the same meaning as ours. She lowered herself to my height, an enormous gesture from someone so tall, and pressed something small and warm into my open palm. It was pale, humming faintly, folded into a shape that mirrored the umbrella I had given away days earlier. A promise, the translator said. Wherever this world stands, my fleet stands beside it. You purchased that promise with a few minutes of rain and a stranger's comfort. Your kind is a strange and generous people, Daniel. I flinched at hearing my own name, wondering how she knew it, then realized the little one must have learned it somehow during those short, silent minutes under my umbrella. The child broke free from the guard beside her and ran across the square, wrapping her small arms around my leg, the exact way my niece did whenever I fixed her broken toys. She said something quick and bright, and the translator caught it a half-second later. She says thank you for keeping the sky off her, the mother explained. And for the first time since the ships arrived, the entire crowd around us fell into a silence that felt gentle instead of frightened. They left an hour later, gliding back into their ship without another word, but the fleet did not leave with them. 40 vessels remained in low orbit above the city. Not as a threat, the news clarified within hours, but as a guard, a debt the aliens insisted on repaying for as long as their people existed. Grace still brings up the umbrella whenever she wants to tease me, saying I traded a $2 umbrella for an entire alien fleet, and somehow still call it a fair deal. I do not argue with her, because she is right. It was a fair deal, and I would make it again without a second thought. Some nights, I sit outside and watch those ships glinting quietly among the stars, remembering a scared child in a gutter and the sound of rain hitting nylon fabric instead of skin. It was such a small thing to offer, a little shelter, a little warmth, a little proof that kindness does not need to understand a language to be understood. And somewhere far above the clouds, a mother who could have brought war, instead, brought gratitude, because on the worst night of her life, a stranger with an ordinary umbrella chose to be kind for no reason at all.